I never thought my life would spiral like this. I'm 29 now, but I feel like I've aged decades in just a few short years. It's hard to put everything into words without feeling a sense of shame and betrayal washing over me all over again. But I guess I should start at the beginning, where things were still good, still hopeful. Her name was Jenna. We met back in 2016 when we were both 21, just young kids in the prime of our lives. She was the kind of woman who turned heads wherever she went, confident, outgoing, and full of life. Her curves were impossible to miss, and she had a natural beauty that made her stand out in any crowd. I was the quieter one, more reserved, more content with staying indoors. Jenna, on the other hand, thrived on attention. She loved going out, trying new things, and living in the moment. We started as friends with benefits. It was casual at first, and I think neither of us expected it to turn into anything more. But 6 months in, something shifted. There was one night when we were lying next to each other after hooking up, and she looked at me in a way that felt different. She confessed her feelings for me, and in that moment, I realized I felt the same. We became exclusive, and for a while, everything seemed perfect. But as time passed, our differences became more noticeable. I liked our quiet nights in, but she craved adventure. She thrived in social settings where other men couldn't take their eyes off her. That was hard for me to deal with, but I pushed those insecurities down. I told myself it didn't matter. She was with me after all. And despite our differences, we made it work. Or at least I thought we did. In 2019, we had our son, Jamie. I was over the moon, and I thought Jenna was too. But that was also when things began to change. She went through a tough labor, and the doctors didn't sew her up properly afterward. The pain lingered for months, and our sex life quickly deteriorated. I tried to be understanding. I really did. But as time went on, it was clear something was wrong. In 2020, I proposed to her. I thought maybe that would bring us closer, that it would reignite whatever was missing between us. But nothing changed. She got a job as a nurse and started working long hours, so long that she barely had time to rest. I ended up looking after Jamie most days while she claimed exhaustion from her shifts. I didn't complain. She was working hard and I wanted to support her. But deep down, a part of me couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The real problem was in the bedroom. Our sex life had become almost non-existent. She blamed the pain from the labor, which made sense at first. But even after the pain subsided, she had every excuse in the book. We were in our late 20s, and I couldn't understand why we were having sex once a month, if that. Every time I brought it up, she'd accuse me of only wanting her for sex, as if I was the bad guy for wanting intimacy in our relationship. I started to suspect there was more to it. The long hours, the constant excuses. Something didn't add up. I even asked her once if she was seeing someone else. She gaslighted me, made me feel like I was crazy for even suggesting it. She told me she was just overwhelmed from work and that I was inconsiderate for not understanding. I was the one paying all the bills, taking care of our son 5 days a week, but I was made to feel like I was asking for too much by wanting more from her. Then came the family trip. Jenna was headed back to her home country to visit relatives, and she left her phone behind, claiming she didn't want it to get lost. That's when my gut instincts kicked in. She never left her phone behind. Never. So, when she was gone, I did the thing I told myself I'd never do. I went through her phone. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for. There it was, an entire message thread with another man. They weren't just talking, they were in love. Their messages were filled with declarations of affection, love hearts, and plans for the future. My stomach churned as I read on. They had been in a relationship for 4 years. 4 years. That meant their affair started not long after our son was born, while we were still trying to figure out our own lives together. But that wasn't even the worst part. As I scrolled through the messages, I discovered that she had gotten engaged to this man in 2023. Engaged. The woman I had proposed to, the mother of my son, had said yes to another man. It was like a punch to the gut. But it didn't stop there. She had gotten pregnant by him more than once, but miscarried every time. And that wasn't all. She had met his family, told him her mom wanted to meet him too, even though her mom knew about me and our engagement. My world was crumbling, and I had no idea what to do. I kept scrolling, digging deeper, Deleted messages, hidden chats. There was so much more. She had been unfaithful for years, long before I had ever suspected anything. There was another man, a doctor from her workplace, who she had also gotten pregnant for but miscarried. And it wasn't just these two men. She was sending flirty messages to others, sending pictures of her body, arranging to meet up with them. I sat there, staring at the screen, my mind spinning. How could she do this? How could she live this double life for so long and still look me in the eye every day, pretending like everything was fine? We were supposed to be a family. We were supposed to be in this together. But clearly, that wasn't enough for her. When Jenna returned from her trip, I confronted her. I didn't hold back. I asked her about the other man, about the engagement, about the pregnancy. She didn't deny it at first. She was more upset that I had gone through her phone. But when I pressed her, she started lying. She said she didn't love him, that she was just using him, that he was like a male version of her. She claimed she'd drop him in a heartbeat if that's what I wanted. I didn't know what to believe. She denied sleeping with him, denied ever being pregnant, even though I had seen the messages. It was like she was trying to rewrite reality, hoping I'd buy into it. She told me her mom didn't know anything about the other guy, that she had lied to him about her mom's involvement. I was torn between confronting her mom and keeping everything to myself. That's where my internal battle began. I felt sick to my stomach thinking about how she could live this double life for so long, telling me she had a low libido while sleeping with other men. I was stuck between wanting to protect my son from being raised by another man and knowing deep down that Jenna would never change. I couldn't sleep that night. My mind was racing, replaying every conversation we had, every time I'd questioned her loyalty and been made to feel like I was the problem. I thought about Jamie, our son, who was fast asleep in the other room, blissfully unaware of the storm that had been brewing. Jenna, the woman I thought I knew, was lying next to me in bed, but she might as well have been a stranger. I stared at the ceiling, wondering how we got here. It wasn't supposed to be like this. We were supposed to be partners, building a life together, raising our son. But the person lying next to me had been living a double life. How could I have been so blind? Every red flag, every instinct I ignored, it was all slapping me in the face now. The next morning, I couldn't even look at her. I could tell she knew I was still angry, but instead of apologizing, she acted like nothing had happened. She got up, went about her routine, showered, and started getting ready for work. Meanwhile, I was left standing in the kitchen, seething in silence. How was she so calm? Did she really think she could sweep this under the rug? I knew I needed to talk to her again to get some real answers. But how do you even begin to fix something that's been broken for years? I didn't just want to hear her excuses. I wanted her to take responsibility, to show some kind of remorse. But when I finally confronted her later that evening, the same pattern repeated itself. "I don't understand why you're making this such a big deal," she said, crossing her arms defensively. "It's not like I actually love him." "Are you serious right now?" I snapped. "You were engaged to him. You were pregnant by him. You lied to me, to your family, to everyone. And you expect me to believe this wasn't a big deal?" She rolled her eyes. "I told you, I was just playing him. He's not important. You're the one I want to be with." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She was trying to minimize the situation like it was some kind of game. But it wasn't a game to me. This was my life. This was our son's future. And yet, she showed no real remorse. It was as if she couldn't understand the weight of what she'd done, how deeply she had hurt me. I pressed her about the other men, the doctor from work, the other guys she had been messaging, sending pictures to, flirting with. She denied it all at first, but then she started backtracking. "Okay, maybe I did talk to other guys," she admitted, "but I never slept with any of them." "And I'm just supposed to take your word for that?" I said, my voice rising. "After everything I've seen, you've been cheating on me for years, Jenna. You've been living a lie. How am I supposed to believe anything you say?" She didn't have an answer for that. She just stood there, staring at the floor like a child who had been caught doing something wrong. But this wasn't some petty mistake. This was betrayal on a level I never thought possible. I felt like I was losing my mind. One moment, I was filled with rage, ready to pack up and leave. The next, I was overcome with sadness, terrified of what this would mean for Jamie. I didn't want my son to grow up in a broken home. I didn't want some other man stepping into my role, raising my child while I watched from the sidelines. But at the same time, how could I stay? How could I ever trust her again after this? Every time I looked at her, all I could think about was the other men she had been with, the lies she had told, the way she had gaslighted me into believing I was the problem. The next few days were a blur of confusion and anger. Jenna kept trying to act like everything was normal, like we could just move past this. She would call me from work, saying she was willing to do anything to make it up to me, that she would cut off all contact with the other guy, that she would prove her love to me. But I knew deep down that she was only saying those things because she got caught. If I hadn't gone through her phone, she would have kept living her double life without a second thought. One night, after she'd gone to bed, I sat in the living room, scrolling through the old messages again. I couldn't help myself. It was like I needed to torture myself with the evidence of her betrayal, as if seeing it over and over would somehow make it easier to accept. But it didn't. It just made me angrier, more disgusted with her, with myself, for letting it go on for so long. I kept coming back to the messages between her and the other guy, the man she'd gotten engaged to. Their conversations were sickeningly sweet, full of "I love yous" and future plans. They talked about meeting each other's families, about how perfect they were for each other, how they were soulmates. It made me want to throw up. How could she say those things to him while living with me, while raising our son together? I didn't know what to do next. My heart told me to stay, to try and fix things for the sake of our son. But my mind was screaming at me to leave, to get out while I still could. She had lied to me for so long, manipulated me, made me feel like I was the one in the wrong. And now she was trying to convince me that she could change, that she could be faithful. But I knew better. Once a cheater, always a cheater, right? I started researching my options: custody, divorce, everything. I didn't want to lose my son, but I also didn't want to spend the rest of my life wondering if Jenna was still sneaking around behind my back. I didn't want Jamie to grow up in a household full of resentment and mistrust. But leaving wasn't that simple. I had to think about Jamie, about his future. If I left, would he end up being raised by some other man? Would Jenna bring someone else into his life, someone I didn't know, someone who could never love him the way I do? The thought of that made my stomach churn. I wasn't just torn between staying and going. I was terrified of what staying or going would mean for Jamie. If I stayed, I'd have to live with Jenna's betrayal, constantly wondering if she was lying to me again. But if I left, I'd risk losing time with my son, risk him growing up with Jenna's new boyfriend, or worse, one of the many men she had been sneaking around with. I felt trapped, like there was no good option. Either way, I was going to lose something. The longer I sat with the decision, the heavier it became. Every time I thought I had made up my mind, something held me back. Jamie's innocent face as he played with his toys, asking when mommy would be home, brought me to my knees emotionally. He had no idea his whole world was on the brink of falling apart, and the weight of that crushed me. Days turned into weeks, and Jenna's behavior became erratic. One day, she'd be overly affectionate, cooking my favorite meals, offering to help with Jamie more, acting like the perfect fiancé. The next day, she'd retreat into herself, her phone constantly in her hand, and I could feel the distance between us growing again. It was like she was running damage control, trying to keep me hooked just enough to stay, but not willing to do the real work of rebuilding trust. I saw through it, but I was too drained to fight her on it anymore. One evening, after Jamie had gone to bed, we had another confrontation. I couldn't keep bottling it up, and I had to know if she'd actually stop talking to the other man like she promised. "Did you cut him off?" I asked, keeping my voice low to avoid waking Jamie. "For real this time, Jenna? Did you end things with him?" She hesitated, her eyes darting to her phone on the coffee table. That split-second pause was all I needed to know the truth. "Why are you always asking me this?" she finally said, exasperated. "I told you it's over with him." I stood up, walking over to where her phone sat. "Let me see your phone then. Prove it." Her face turned pale. "Are you serious right now?" She grabbed her phone, clutching it to her chest. I can't believe you don't trust me. After everything I've said, after all these weeks. I clenched my jaw, my patience wearing thin. How can I trust you when you've lied to me for years? You expect me to just take your word for it after everything I've seen? Hand me your phone, Jenna. She shook her head, taking a step back. I'm not doing this. This is an invasion of my privacy. I let out a bitter laugh. Privacy? Really? After all the secrets you've kept from me? You want to talk about privacy? She glared at me, her grip on her phone tightening. I told you, it's over. I'm trying to make this work, but you keep pushing me away. Maybe if you weren't so obsessed with controlling everything, we wouldn't be in this mess. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. She was still deflecting, still refusing to take responsibility. I'd had enough. You're unbelievable, I muttered, shaking my head. You're still talking to him, aren't you? After everything, you're still lying to me. Jenna didn't answer, but her silence was confirmation enough. I felt a rush of cold anger wash over me. I couldn't live like this anymore, constantly questioning, constantly doubting, constantly feeling like I was losing my mind. I'm done, I said quietly, my voice trembling with emotion. I can't do this anymore, Jenna. I can't keep pretending like everything's fine when you've been lying to me this whole time. Her eyes widened in shock, as if she hadn't expected me to actually walk away. Wait, what do you mean? You're not serious, right? You're going to break up our family over this? I'm not the one who broke our family, I shot back, my voice rising. You did. You've been breaking it for years, and I've been too blind to see it. But I see it now, Jenna. I see everything. She stared at me, her eyes filling with tears. But I love you, she whispered, her voice cracking. I don't want to lose you. I don't want to lose our family. For a moment, I hesitated. I wanted to believe her, wanted to believe that she really did love me and that we could somehow fix this. But then I remembered the messages, the lies, the years of deceit. I remembered the way she had looked at her phone instead of at me when I asked her to prove she'd cut him off. Love wasn't supposed to feel like this. Love wasn't supposed to hurt this much. I love you too, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. But I can't keep doing this. I deserve better. Jamie deserves better. Her tears started flowing freely now, and she reached out to grab my hand. Please, just give me one more chance, she begged. I'll prove it to you. I'll cut him off for real this time. I'll do anything. Just don't leave me. I pulled my hand away, stepping back. I've given you enough chances, I said, my heart breaking with every word. This isn't about one mistake, Jenna. This is about years of betrayal. You've been living a double life, lying to my face, cheating on me while I've been here, raising our son, paying the bills, holding everything together. I can't trust you anymore. I can't do this. She collapsed onto the couch, sobbing into her hands. But I couldn't comfort her. Not this time. I turned away, walking toward the bedroom where Jamie slept peacefully, unaware of the chaos unfolding around him. I spent that night in the spare room, my mind racing with what the next steps would be. Divorce, custody battles, splitting assets. It all felt overwhelming. But as I lay there in the darkness, I realized that staying would be even worse. Staying would mean living in a constant state of distrust, always wondering if she was lying, always questioning her loyalty. And I couldn't live like that anymore. The next morning, I sat Jenna down for one final conversation. I told her I was leaving, that I'd be filing for full custody of Jamie. She didn't take it well, of course. She tried to manipulate me, guilt me into staying, saying I was tearing our family apart. But I stood my ground. For the first time in a long time, I felt certain about my decision. I moved out that same week, taking Jamie with me. It wasn't easy, far from it. But as the days went on, I started to feel a sense of relief. I didn't have to constantly check Jenna's phone, didn't have to worry about who she was talking to or what she was hiding. I could finally breathe again. It's been a few months now since I left, and I'm still adjusting to life as a single dad. Jamie is my priority, and every day I remind myself that I made the right decision for him. Jenna still tries to reach out, still says she wants to fix things, but I don't let her get to me anymore. I've moved on, and I know I'm better off without her. I look at Jamie, and I know I did the right thing. He deserves a father who is present, who isn't consumed by doubt and mistrust. And as hard as it was to leave, I know that staying would have been worse for both of us. I'm still healing, still processing everything that happened. but I'm hopeful. Hopeful that one day I'll find someone who truly values me, someone who I can trust without question. And until then, I have Jamie.